Snowdrop posed before the mirror. She raised her arms artlessly, and the pink sweets rose further from their black froth containers. Between the silky limbs, under the corset's ribboned border, Snowdrop's private hair, dark and thick like the fur of a cat, seemed the blackest thing in the room. "That's very pretty," said Christenna. She felt heavy, languid, tingling mad. She put her hands around Snowdrop's body and made a small adjustment to the corset top. Her fingers brushed an icing sugar nipple. Snowdrop giggled. "Now, you mustn't be ticklish," said Christenna. She tried the nipple again. Snowdrop squirmed, pressing back against her. In the mirror, Christenna saw the beautiful doll with its bosom popping from the frills, its hand-span waist, and its naked lower limbs wriggling. Snowdrop's eyes were shut and her red lips parted. Christenna pulled the girl backward against her body. She caressed her breasts, sought the V of coal-black fur. She watched in the mirror. Snowdrop writhed. She parted her legs and thrust her buttocks into Christenna's belly. She uttered tiny, shrill squeaks. Fire engulfed Christenna. She pinioned Snowdrop, rubbing, tickling, squeezing, choked by the perfume of roses and cinnamon, hair and skin, drunken and furious, and the girl was screaming in the glass of a demon of black and white and red. Christenna felt the climax roll up between her thighs, turning her inner life, her soul, over and over in blind ecstasy as Snowdrop wailed in her grip and the room exploded. When Christenna came to herself, Snowdrop was sitting cross-legged on the floor. She sucked her thumb and played with the ribbons of the corset, like a spoiled child who knows it has been naughty, but that this will not matter. Christenna told herself it would not matter, over and over again as she assisted the kitchen in the preparation of a lavish supper. Never in her life had she experienced such alarm. It was not shame, more terror, for Snowdrop came of a dangerous, scurrilous race, who knew now what she might do. For the moment she sat on the couch, still in the corset and still half nude, drinking wine and looking at the television, in whose speculative lens she had first appeared. Later it was possible she might be persuaded to go back to the city, but then again she might want to spend the night here. And after tonight, how many other nights? What payment would she exact, in emotion or hard cash? How luminous her eyes as she glanced about her at the furnishings of Christenna's husband's house. Christenna put the last touches to the food and drink. Her hands were shaking, but she pulled herself together and made herself survey what she had done. It was a meal of red, white, and black, although she doubted Snowdrop would take this in, let alone appreciate it. White soft rolls and creamy cheeses, slices of palest chicken in an almond sauce, caviar, fat grapes as black as agate, pomegranate seeds, burgundy apples whose crisp hearts were the shade of virgin ice. In the decanter, a rich ruby wine. As she followed the service trolley into the living room, Christenna wished there had been someone to pray to. But there was not. She must deal with this herself. "I hope you're hungry." "Oh, yes, I like my food," said Snowdrop, who had looked as if she lived on honeydew. She began to eat at once. Alcohol and orgasm had evidently stimulated her appetite. Christenna observed. She was prepared to say, if pressed, No, I had dinner earlier, you have it all. But Snowdrop, gobbling up everything in a prissy yet vulture-like way, did not bother with Christina, did not seem to notice that her hostess ate nothing. As more and more of the food and wine were consumed, Christina's shaking increased. When Snowdrop plucked up one of the gleaming red apples, Christina flinched. Of all the feast, she was afraid she had taken a chance with the apples. Snowdrop put the apple to her mouth and bit into it. Then, quite slowly, her jaw dropped. Christina saw inside her mouth, to the piece of white and red apple lying on Snowdrop's tongue. Snowdrop looked at Christina, mildly inquiring. She said. Then her eyes turned up in their sockets, and she slid from the couch to the carpet. She lay there half an hour, motionless. Then there was a small spasm, which did not wake her. Crystal urine flowed out and wet the rug. A thread of scarlet slipped between Snowdrop's lips. That was all. She was dead. She could not be anything else. Christina had crushed 20 tasteless, soluble sleeping capsules in the wine, and in the sauces, meat, fish, cheese, and fruit had gone the odorless, soft, corrosive cleaning acids of the house, the unsmelling garden pesticides. She had burnished the apples with a vitriolic substance employed to polish the mirrors. The house buried Snowdrop's body without any difficulty in the garden. After the job had been done, the digger took up deep snow from the lawn and packed it in above the grave. But in any case that night new snow came down and covered everything. If there were reports on the television of Snowdrop's disappearance, Christina, who studied the screen closely, did not see them. Presumably no one knew where Snowdrop had gone of the night of her vanishment, and perhaps ultimately nobody cared. The 7 dwarfs had not liked her and would probably find it challenging to locate and train another beautiful lost child as their helpmeet and victim. Christina felt no compunction. She had had to protect herself. She settled down and completed her novel, then put it into the machine to be typed. By the time her husband returned to the house, the book would be in the hands of her publishers, and she could present him with the advance which would humiliate him. He came home some weeks early, when the snow was still down across the landscape. Calling her from the airport, he told her that he was bringing 2 of his business associates, and in the background she heard their hearty, stupid, inebriated voices. Christina was not pleased, but she made believe she did not mind, sure he would bring the men to upset her, and she could ruin his trick by seeming unconcerned. She went about the house, behind the automatic dusters. For months she had thought of it mostly as hers. She did not suppose he would like the new color scheme, and he was capable of having it changed. Christina braced herself to be merry and careless. The men arrived in the afternoon and came swaggering up to the house. Her husband was in the lead. He had put on yet more weight, and she had never seen him look so ugly, as if he had done it on purpose. For an hour or so the male colleagues sprawled in the living room, eating things the kitchen prepared and drinking beer. Christina's husband had greeted her with affectionate disinterest and now largely ignored her, but he had not remarked adversely on the redecoration. Indeed, he abruptly praised it. "The house is looking good, but wait until you see what I've brought for the garden." And somehow he made it obvious he had deliberately not brought a present for Christenna, who did not deserve one, but for the house. They went on outside into the freezing twilight day. With the help of the house porter, Christenna's husband trundled a large lamp-like structure into the garden and set it up among the birch trees. He threw a switch and the lamp began softly to hum. From its bowl a yellow light streamed out and bathed the slope. It became warm. Strange scents shot from the ground, the trees. They were the smells of spring. "The snow will be gone in minutes," said Christenna's husband. "The plants start coming up in half an hour. You can have a spring and summer garden in the middle of winter. Expensive, I'll admit, this sun lamp, but wait till you see." They waited, and they saw, and presently, after they had been splashed with snow and mud from the broiling, roiling earth, they retreated into the living room and looked on from there. The garden was in flux, in tumult. Snow rushed in avalanches from the trees and along the ground. A kind of seismic activity thrust up huge tumuli, which seemed to boil, and on these peculiar black mounds the porcelain flowers of spring bubbled through. "You see?" asked Christenna's husband excitedly. Christenna did. It was only a matter of time, and already she was leaden and self-possessed. Finally, after only 20 minutes, sabotaged by the sun lamp, the lid of dense snow had melted off and the sides of the grave gave way. The upheaval in the earth pushed from below, and Snowdrop came out once more from the dark. The cryogenic cold had preserved her flawlessly. The pressure on her spine made her sit slowly up in the grave, to the astonished wonder of the 3 gaping men. And she was as white as snow, black as wood, and her pale red mouth opened, and the bit of apple, also exactly preserved, fell out. And so she sat there exquisitely, with her lips parted and her eyes closed, dead as a doornail, until the men turned to Christenna with their questions.